terms of the favored framework of the sizes, shapes, and speeds of material things and their impacts on the sense organs. The result was a theory that distinguished between properties that physical objects really and intrinsically possessed, such as shape and size, and properties that physical objects only appeared to possess, namely color, smell, and other sensible qualities. In distinguishing between a sense-based conception of the material world and the more austere mathematical conception, Descartes committed himself to the view that the latter was the more objective of the two. Other believers in the new science were committed to the same thing. They sometimes tried to convey the superiority of the mathematical conception by saying that it was like God's. But Descartes was able to go beyond vague talk of a godlike perspective and spell out the difference between the sense-based and mathematical conceptions of the material world. He showed that the former was systematically open to doubt, while the latter was free of uncertainty, and he proposed a method for detaching oneself from the sense-based conception and adopting the more objective one. Implementing the method himself, Descartes got impressive results in several branches of natural science as well as pure mathematics. Other writers, such as Francis Bacon and Galileo, were able to match his achievement only in part. Though Bacon developed a method for counteracting the limitations of common sense in traditional physics, his doubts about the sensory world were not as far-reaching as Descartes'. Again, while Bacon made room for a more objective conception of nature, he did not identify it as an essentially mathematical one. Galileo did make that identification, but had no real theory to explain why the mathematical approach fitted the physical world so well. Cartesian metaphysics supplied the missing theory. It held that the human mind was constituted by God to enjoy perfect certainty about material things when conceiving them mathematically. It pointed out that God had the power to create whatever we could conceive with certainty, and it held that God was too benevolent to let the human mind fall into error when it conceived with certainty the mathematical nature of matter. This explanation of how matter and mathematics were made for one another is not formulated in terms we are likely to find either familiar or compelling. But then, we do not need to be persuaded that a mathematical physics is viable. The spectacular success of mathematical physics as an instrument of measurement, prediction, and control since the 17th century has made redundant any theory proving that a mathematical physics is possible. But the formulation of Descartes' theory helped to make way for some of the early research that produced the successes that have justified our confidence in the modern science of matter. Descartes' metaphysical theory now commands more attention than his own particular version of mathematical physics, for his most distinctive speculations in the physical sciences started to be superseded within a few decades of his death. Nevertheless, the research that produced them and the process of assembling them virtually monopolized the productive period of his life. Scientific rather than philosophical questions dominated Descartes' work. He confronted them with a strong sense of what they had in common, with definite ideas about the order in which they should be tackled, and with the conviction that he personally could find answers to most of them. Chapter 2. The Discovery of a Vocation. It seems to have been almost by accident that Descartes ever developed enough confidence in himself or enough enthusiasm for the undertaking to sustain the research program he eventually began. When he was born in Touraine, in northwestern France, on March 31st, 1596, it was not into a family of scientists. His paternal grandfather and great-grandfather had both been doctors, but his father was a lawyer and magistrate. His maternal grandfather had held high public office in Poitiers. Other relations of his mother appear to have had jobs as legal officials. The families on both parents' sides were either minor aristocrats or on the fringes of the nobility, well off and well educated, but not particularly inclined toward science. Nothing in his early years at home pointed to his eventual career.